Dr. Al-Ansari, welcome to 7:30.
Thank you for having me.
Is a deal now possible between Israel and Hamas?
Well, I mean, we remain hopeful and certainly committed to the mediation process. As you have probably heard, we have been meeting in Doha in the last weekend in the hopes of bridging the gap between the two sides over various issues, and our technical meetings have taken place on Sunday and Monday in Cairo, and we are hoping by the end of this week to have another principals meeting that will also be able to push forward the agreement and to bridge the remaining gaps between both sides.
Just before I ask you a couple of questions about the tensions, the very serious differences that remain between Israel and Hamas, I just want to ask you about Qatar's role, because you choose to continue the negotiations without Hamas in the room. How do you achieve a solution without the principals there with you in the room?
You know, this is not our first rodeo. Qatar has been mediating for various mediations in the past, starting with the Evian agreements in 1962. So we have the capacity to deal with different contexts when it comes to these kind of mediations. In the past, in dealing between Hamas and Israel, we have mediated in the same manner in various ways where Hamas was not in the room, and we were able to communicate between both sides. Every time we have a mediation meeting where we bring in the mediators, our partners in Egypt and the United States, and obviously the Israelis, and then we relay whatever has been discussed in that meeting in very specific language to the other side, and we go back and forth between them to reach a deal. This is what happened in 2014, what happened in 2021, and what happened actually a week before the 7th of October when we were able to reach an agreement between both sides. It's very rare that we see direct negotiations between Hamas and Israel. It almost never has happened before in the history of mediation between both sides. So I think it's something that we've done in the past. We've been able to accomplish results in the past while doing, and we have the flexibility to do it in the way that is realistic and possible in the current confines of the mediation.
Now, we know that the new leader of Hamas, although he was obviously responsible for the negotiations previously, but Yahya Sinwar was responsible for the October 7 attacks. Is a peace deal possible with him as the leader of Hamas?
You know, more difficult partners in peace have been on such tables in the past and signed such agreements in the past. If you look at the statements before the Oslo Accords were signed back then between Arafat and Rabin, you'd think that these two gentlemen would never sign any deal for peace. And obviously we know from history today that the biggest chance for peace was signed by Rabin, the late Yitzhak Rabin, and by the late Arafat at the time. We are facing a similar situation right now. We understand the traumatic results of the 7th of October on the Israeli people. We understand the traumatic results of the war on Gaza right now on the people in Gaza altogether. It is not an easy mediation to go through. It's not an easy discussion, and it's not an easy way and pathway towards peace. However, all those involved right now, I think, are interested in reaching a deal because the situation on the ground is becoming more and more difficult every day for everybody. We've breached the line of 40,000 innocents killed as a result of this war right now. The level of devastation in Gaza is unparalleled, and we need a deal now in order to be able to save whatever is left of this sector of more than 1 million people in a situation that cannot be accepted in the international community today.
Should Israel be able to patrol the Gaza side of the border with Egypt and maintain a corridor that will separate the north and the south of Gaza to prevent Hamas from reconsolidating? Are those conditions something that Israel will ever shift on?
Obviously, we are working with our partners in the mediation and with the parties of the conflict to find solutions to these issues. Obviously, as reported in the media, along with Australian media, this has been one of the main sticking points between both sides. But we are trying to find innovative solutions to this issue that would address both sides' concerns. And I wouldn't say that we have now concluded negotiating over this issue, but it is certainly one of the main issues with our partners in Egypt and the United States that we are working on to bridge the gap between both sides' positions.
It's obviously a time of enormous peril in the Middle East, with extensive concerns about what will happen between Iran and Israel, as well as the ongoing horrors that you just referred to in Gaza. What is your assessment of Iran's likely response to the twin assassinations, the one in Tehran and the other of the Hezbollah leader in Lebanon?
We've been in contact with both sides. We've been relaying messages to Tehran and from Tehran to the other side to make sure that the lines of communication are open and we are able to at least minimize the effects of any Iranian response. We've been talking to the Iranians for the past couple of weeks now, and actually the past couple of months over that issue, and we are confident that through the mediation process, through getting a deal in Gaza, through de-escalating in Gaza, we will be able to de-escalate in the region as a whole, whether it be in relation to what is happening between Iran and Israel, or in Yemen with the Houthis, or in other locales where all of these mini conflicts are becoming more serious every day.
Just briefly on Netanyahu, because it's often said that he is not actually interested in an end to all hostilities because it will weaken his position as Prime Minister, indeed possibly end it. Is that true, or is that just something that is speculated on in the media?
I can't comment on behalf of the Israeli government right now, but what I can tell you is that we are engaging positively with the Israeli government and with Hamas in this negotiation, and we urge all of our partners in the world, including our friends here in Australia, to help us in convincing both sides to come to the table and to sign a deal as soon as possible.
Who does Yahya Sinwar listen to?
Well, right now in the mediation process, obviously, the only leverage we have is the fact that the mediation process is still ongoing. And I think right now, regardless of who Yahya Sinwar or anybody else is listening to, it's the process itself that has proved successful in the past, that has brought about the only week of calm during this conflict, and we need to trust the process itself to produce results.
Just a few questions about how Australia responds to this. There is a debate here about allowing people fleeing from Gaza to come to Australia because of concerns expressed over the levels of support for Hamas in Gaza. Do you believe those are legitimate concerns?
Obviously, this is an issue for the Australian people and their government to discuss within the parameters of national interest of Australia. We have said very clearly, of course, that the humanitarian situation in Gaza is unbearable. We are talking about more than 40,000 dead, more than 100,000 injured or lost their capacity during this war. There is an outbreak of polio now in Gaza. The situation is completely inhumane. And also, Australia shares with the region losses as a result of this war on the humanitarian side. We have all, seen the very sad incident where an Israeli strike killed, of course, the Australian citizen along with her colleagues in the World Central Kitchen. Zumi was working there for the people. She was sacrificing, and she did offer the highest level of sacrifice. She sacrificed her life in the hopes of making it less difficult for the people living there in Gaza, seeing less death and destruction in Gaza. It is something that we appreciate very highly. We commend our friends in Australia for being part of that. And I know that there are difficult discussions over a lot of these issues, but this is, when you are dealing with such a humanitarian catastrophe, obviously such questions will arise.
Now, when Spain, Norway and Ireland recognised the state of Palestine recently, you said that it was an important step. Should Australia do the same thing?
We have always said that the Palestinian people deserve to live in their own independent state. As any other peoples around the world, they have the right to self-determination, and the Security Council resolutions have always said since the 1970s that the Palestinians should have their own state. Obviously, Qatar recognizes the state of Palestine, and we hope that all peace-loving friends around the world would do the same in giving the Palestinians their right in an independent state. And that, of course, has to go hand in hand with a peace process that is sponsored by the international community, that would produce a viable state that would provide the dreams and hopes of the Palestinian people, but also security to Israel and the region.
But if Australia should recognise Palestine ahead of a two-state solution, the completion of that process, shouldn't Qatar do the same with Israel?
We have said it very clearly that we have been engaging with the Israelis over a lot of these issues, and whether it be the mediation or other sides of the relationship. But we need to keep the leverage on all our sides, of course. We need to keep the leverage in the right place. Whenever we are talking about recognition here, we are talking about the recognition of the peace process itself, and the result of that peace process is a two-state solution. And obviously, the decisions of sovereign countries are left to their own devices. We applaud these decisions whenever they come, but they have to be done, of course, through the internal dynamics of each state.
Now, the national carrier of Qatar, Qatar Airways, plays a major role in your country's positioning itself as a significant player of global significance. Is the Prime Minister, Foreign Minister here to convince Australia to allow Qatar more landing rights in Australia?
The relationship between Qatar and Australia is multifaceted, and this relationship cannot be linked to one issue alone. Obviously, our national carrier has been one of the national champions of Qatar. As you know, it has helped in repatriating a lot of Australian citizens during the pandemic, and we pride ourselves in how Qatar Airways has been able to function in the international community during such difficult times. And obviously, the discussions between the carrier and Australia are ongoing, and we are always hopeful to increase the amount of people coming in and out of Qatar to and from Australia.
One question that does go to the government, although it involves the airways, was the terrible incident in 2020 when 13 Australian women were subjected to invasive physical searches at Doha Airport. Does the government of Qatar owe those women an apology?
The government of Qatar has offered an apology through the previous Prime Minister of Qatar at the time. And I can tell you here very equivocally that this is not a thing that would be accepted in Qatar by anybody. I would not certainly want this on any of my family members or any women of my country. And I think it's a terrible incident. We have done all that we can from a legal perspective. We have engaged with the Australian government and with the women in question in order to reach a resolution. And I can tell you, as a father of 5 girls, that I would never accept something like this happening to my daughters or my family members. And we have taken, as a government, all the measures necessary to make sure that this never happens again in Qatar.
Dr. Al-Ansari, I really appreciate your time coming in to talk to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.